A sharp scenery was screamed in the air as Chase went on the attack. Liberty was grabbed and forcefully slammed against the fleshy wall, causing a splash of goo with a sickening quelch sound. Rocky stared in horror at the domestic exchange, his movements frozen as fear spread across his face. "Chase, calm down," Zuma snapped through his collar. If the lab was physically there, he would have probably had the chance to stop in the attack. But here he was, merely on words of deaf ears. The shepherd was spiraling out of control, and already he was haunted by the terrible act that he committed just several hours ago. But now dropped into a hell of organic corruption, free to defile what had remaining hope he had. Learning that Ryder could have played a role in the chaos was the straw that broke the camel's back. Even then, Chase refused to accept it. Instead, shifting his attention to something else. "Ugh!" he choked off as the dash hound as she was hit by the wall. "What are you?" Chase snarled at her, keeping his paws firmly pinned to her body. "What have you done? Tell me now!" He bared his teeth and emitted a fierce snarl, almost ready to tear Liberty into pieces. He hated it. He hated her. He hated the infection. He hated the monster. He hated everything he was forced to face and was sparked with a deadly rage within him. And yet, he hated nothing more than himself, and somehow that made him amongst the angriest of all. "I didn't do anything," Liberty pleaded, trying to wrench free. "I've already told you why I was here." "Bullshit," the shepherd refused to listen. "Everything you do and say is bullshit." Rocky raced over in desperate attempt to defuse the situation. "Chase!" He put his paw on his friend's shoulder in attempt to get through to him. Groaning in pain as he was pinned against the living surface, Liberty had searched for any meaning left in the shepherd's eyes. "What had happened to you?" "Do I really need to answer that? Is it not obvious?" "No, answer me," Liberty returned the hostile stare. "Everyone is on edge, sure, but you have changed." She was well accustomed to reading others, picking up on their behaviors and mannerisms no one else could. "You aren't the police dog I met in Adventure City." "Liberty, stop!" Rocky pleaded, for her to cease talking, knowing that it would anger Chase even more. She would defy the words, going all in as she met Chase's gaze with a smug look. "You know they say in moments of danger, do you find out what kind of people your friends are?" She grinned, how unfazed as her body remained locked against the surface. "How can you even say that?" Chase said, appalled. "We all witnessed that thing rip out of rubble, and we lay waste in the courtyard, of course. We've changed. But there's something else, isn't there?" Liberty laughed. "Marshall and Rocky seem just like I remember them." Now it was Rocky's turn to be offended. "What?" The dachshund brushed off the comment. "Why you, Chase? Why were you so different? What happened to you?" She leaned in, staring directly into Chase's seething pupils. To do this was risking her life, as one wrong comment could send the shepherd into a frenzy and kill her. To think that Chase was capable of killing someone was a haunting thought, but something told Liberty that it wasn't too far off from the truth. "I told the truth, didn't I? Now you tell me yours." Berserk screams of played in the storm in Chase's head. The static that clouded his mind yet still remained. Only now it was beginning to take form. It twisted its turn and its noise into words, issuing commands that Chase hadn't obeyed yet. They were getting louder, however, that the noise was slowly pulling the puppy into suffering and distress. It looked like he was thinking. The shepherd's eyes flicked around like he was searching for answers to the situation. But he wasn't. He was fighting, frantically pushing back his own mind in desperate attempt to not be responsible for another death. He couldn't kill her, at least not now. My truth?" he breathed out, finally registering what Liberty had asked him. His ears fell, then stood again, like his own body was unsure of how to react. "Yes, and," Liberty said, let out a chuckle sigh, "can you please let me down?" After a moment, Chase obliged and released his city friend from his grasp, but not without narrowing his eyes in a distrustful gesture. Rocky could be heard sighing in relief, thanking whatever deity above that situation had not escalated more than it had. It was then a wave of confusion and shame hit the mixed breed. a feeling that was new and unprepared for. Watching Chase manhandle Liberty was disturbing, and how he wondered if there was something more he could have done about it. It was obvious that it was just his word alone that he couldn't save the Dachshund. Wouldn't he have been able to restrain Chase and save her? He felt useless, evident, as he slightly turned away from the duo and stared off into a line of teeth that trailed along the sickly pink wall. Chase sat down, not caring that his tail was now dipped in the translucent sludge. Was it really time to tell the truth? It wasn't. It couldn't be. He had to let someone know, but he had to let anyone know what it was tearing him apart inside, to see over and over the atrocity he had committed. Yet every second it remained untold was another second from this free. Was he truly free? Was it freeing to never tell the truth? The static only became stronger as more sealed the truth within him. But he knew the static was never going to go away. Or was it? Chase? Liberty tilted her head, reaching out to the broken shepherd. When he pulled the trigger on Sky, his spirit immediately shattered apart. The pieces were dropped down into the void and left to burn in the endless suffering over one stupid action he had wished he could take back. The static had told him nothing remained, that he was merely just a cold, lifeless shell of what he once was. But the darkness was known to lie. Perhaps there was a faint glimmer of himself still fighting in the relevant, a tiny remnant of a loyal shepherd in the blue that would jump in action to help those he loved. He slowly turned and mixed his head to his friend, too ashamed to actually meet the mix's gaze. Rocky, go on ahead. Huh? Just please give us a minute. The mix looked at Liberty, who returned a small nod to him. Unsure of himself, he sighed and turned away. He didn't want to be alone, and wandering off into a dark living abyss, and it was not something he was fond of doing. He started walking, leaving Chase and Liberty behind as he took the corridor. He wouldn't go far, just enough till they were out of earshot, and then he would stay put and hide. Chase watched him go, seeing the gray-white tail disappeared into the darkness, already regretting everything he was agreeing to. But there was no other option. To tell Marshall the truth would break their bond, destroying the brotherly relationship they built over the years. Telling Rocky would shatter his trust, pretty much leaving him to denounce Chase's leadership, so he fiercely upheld. Telling Zuma would be his worst mistake, would confirm anything else that the lab already suspected, and possibly result in a bloody dogfight. He's gone, Liberty said, simply sitting down to face Chase. Now talk to me. His mind grew, forcing Chase to wince slightly as a piercing noise hit his ear. Liberty remained unaffected, witnessing the front row of mental agony that he was going through. It all built up into a cacophony of crooked music, screeching so loud that he could barely hear anything else. He had to tell her, but the other voice scolded him not to. He wanted to open up, but a force within him constantly stabbed in a needle and threaded through his body, sewing up to his lie to never see the light. Tell her, don't tell her, tell her, don't tell her. He shook a little, his voice cracking. Static spiraled out of control, threatening to consume his brain. Pressure was building like an inactive volcano, like it churned and intensified, all leading up to one powerful mind break to take Chase's soul into the void where it belonged. He said again, kneeling in his paws. His ears deafened, vision blurring over as the words and phrases echoed in his head. He couldn't quite make out what they were saying, but they were all fizzling like a ticking time bomb, screaming and wailing. Varrock's mouths screeched played on repeat in his ears, forcing him to listen over and over until he was disoriented that he couldn't breathe. I killed Sky. Everything stopped. It all suddenly stopped like a flick of a light switch. Chase felt a weight lifted from him, alongside the pained, broken words that left his muzzle. His mind was quiet again, and he could breathe easily for the first time in hours. What? Liberty drew back a little, raising an eyebrow. I killed her. Well, was she infected? Wasn't she? Liberty shrugged. You did what you had to. No, you don't understand, the shepherd whined, trying to fight back tears. She was never infected to begin with. The Dachshund's eyes widened in shock, now beginning to catch on. Hell, at the time, I didn't know if Rox Miles was even here. Chase hung his head, but Cyrus made it sound horrible, and I was scared, he confessed. I was so scared, like when I had to go back to Adventure City. But it was much worse than this time. A sorrowful feeling hit him, as he remembered the traumatizing events that he endured beneath the skyscrapers of the city. His memory called back to the device Cyrus had given him. He gave me this, a thing that could apparently read blood and sound like an alarm when it detected anything foreign. I knew Sky was sick, as did everyone else, and well, that wasn't what I mostly hinged on. What was she sick with? Liberty asked. Fuck if I know. She could have been literally just the flu or something, the shepherd growled slightly. It was a terrible coincidence that I focused on, completely ignoring everyone else. Who knows, Rubble could have had an obvious sign of being infected, and I never caught it. His friend moved to the side, slowly, sympathetically placing her paw onto his. I murdered her, Liberty, he choked out, voice breaking. I just fucking shot her like a common criminal, and she didn't even have time to react. She just died. He tried to say something else, but the shepherd could no longer contain himself. He lowered his head. A simple pose outside within him was so torn to shreds. His mistakes and failures were scratching at his heart. He had failed his patrol. He had failed his rider. He had failed Adventure Bay. And he failed himself. Chase, his friend said softly, stopping as she tried to find the words. I'm so sorry. She gently leaned on his shoulder and draped her arm around him, pulling him for a soft hug. Chase didn't return the gesture. To make matters worse, he said again, I left my gun in the boiler room, along with the ACG radio Cyrus gave me. Like an idiot, I discarded them. Now the power is out and I can't get them back without Rocky fixing the breakers. And for what? That he needs to come down here. We're literally all in this mess because of me. It's my fault. Dogs made mistakes. It's okay, Liberty tried to reason with him. No, Chase replied a little harshly. To call this mistake is insignificant. I fucked up. I completely fucked up. Okay, well, she stammered, growing tad agitated. Everyone fucks up at some point. Look at me. He met her gaze. What have you done? A lot of things, she laughed awkwardly. She took a deep breath. I had to give up a puppy once. The words left her mouth. For a moment, Chase didn't believe what she had just heard. A puppy? He tilted his head. What do you mean? An infant, Chase, she clarified. I had an infant. An infant I couldn't take care of. A sad sigh left her, as she too bowed her head. So I had to give him up. Left him at the fire station. Aren't you a puppy, though? The police officer put together. How did you? Let's just say I made a really big mistake. Fell in love with the wrong dog. Liberty held a paw out, gesturing as she spoke. A lot of things happened to me and well, I may have changed or completely ended the life of an infant. Jesus. So I guess what I'm trying to say is, I understand a little at least. She gave a soft smile. Even though it was roughly a year ago, it still haunts me. I guess it didn't kill anyone that I know of. The two dogs sat in silence, both listening to the gentle churning of the stomach-like hallway they resided in. It was weirdly calming sound to Chase's ears, a feeling he never thought he'd get across with the disgusting nightmare that Vrox Miles had created down there. What am I supposed to tell Ryder? He said, finally staring down at the floor. That I killed one of her own by mistake. I don't think Ryder's ever coming back. The shepherd whipped around and snarled. He is. You'll see. A faint whine emitted from him as he backed up to look at the hellish environment. Ryder wouldn't abandon us. He never would. Grunting as he called forward with all the strength within him, Zuma heaved in a strained breath, pushing aside the folded table that was blocking a new door. The lab was eager to get moving, motivated by the discovery of the device that seemingly interfered with their communications. He put his nose onto the floor and searched for any possible signs of a new path, eventually discovering a door that was blocked by a variety of discarded utilities. Marshall sat alongside, dragging his paws along the ground, a subtle coping mechanism as he tried to keep himself calm. Zuma had seemed obvious to his friend's distress, or did he know that he was just ignoring? The Dalmatian and his friend attempted to dislodge a large computer, the last object away from the door. Unfortunately, it was significantly heavier than anything else, and Zuma was unsuccessful. The spotted puppy tried to reach out to the lab. I want to go back to Chase. Why? Zuma asked his simple reply, not even turning around. What's so special about him? Nothing, I just... The Dalmatian lowered himself to the floor, resting his chin on his paws. No offense, Zuma, but I think I just feel safer with him. Now Zuma whipped around. Safer than me? Chase will throw you to that thing the first chance it gets. I've noticed you don't really trust him that much anymore. Marshall narrowed his eyes. Well, you can't trust most these days. The lab's words were disturbing as his companion, more so considering the irony of the statement. Getting increasingly anxious, Marshall licked his paw a few times before getting to his fur. There was a little that he could do to actually soothe his fears. A simple groom being next to the best thing. Zuma tried to move the obstacle again, but to no avail. Damn it, literally the one thing in our way. Maybe there's another way to move it. Marshall tried to get his participation in, not wanting Zuma to think that he was lazy. There isn't, unless you have super strength. I guess we could really use some of those mighty pup powers worries about now, the Dalmatian said with a faint smile. Remembering the adventures they had, he smiled then fell. Remembering the only pup to gain strength was Rubble. It was obvious that Zuma was remembering too, as there was a noticeable dip in his mood. A wave of sadness rained on him. Rubble's gone, he said quietly, mourning the loss of his good friend. Picking his head up a little, Marshall got up and walked over to his friend, seeking to comfort him. Coming to his side, he spotted the dog held up his arm and offering a hug. Zuma completely ignored it, not even looking at his companion. This is Chase's fault, he hissed. What has he done? With a solid question, what exactly had Chase done? He went behind the backs of the team, conspiring with the military organization that scared Rocky, and he withdrew vital information from them, keeping away a twisted secret, a threat that walked along the side of the dogs, and didn't reveal until it was actually the last minute, while flashing a gun around. That was the worst one. The weapon that Chase had as a police officer would surely be so familiar with. He murdered Sky in front of everyone, and Zuma now fully believed that to be a fact. He didn't need Chase to confess his sins, or secretly slide him a note with the truth written on it. He simply just knew. He knew that Chase was no longer the German Shepherd they once loved and laughed with. That dog was insane. No less of a monster than the creature that haunted him. He killed Sky, Marshall. The words hit the Dalmatian like a bullet train. He could be seen visibly freezing up. He stammered. I know we cannot talk about this. No, you're not understanding. Zuma turned to face him. Sky never had the monster in her. It was Rubble. Chase assumed it was her and shot her in front of everyone without giving her a fair chance to explain. That's not... Marshall blinked, a confused expression on his face as he tried to process the information. He wouldn't. Wouldn't what? The shepherd challenged him. Kill someone? He's a cop. It's what they do. The Dalmatian backed up, staring in horror as he defied the words. Zuma, no! His shaky voice went. You can hate Chase, but you can't say those things about him. Say what? The truth? Zuma followed steadily, beginning to back into Marshall into the wall. Maybe if you weren't so starry-eyed around him, you'd actually see it. A low growl escaped from him, and Marshall drew back further, now feeling more afraid. I don't trust him, and you shouldn't either, Zuma shrugged. And I'm not forcing that on you. It's just my suggestion. We could all die here if we make the wrong move, given the circumstances. We can't afford holding our trust on someone if we feel that they'll tear us all down. You mean, Marshall dared to say, a lift of defiance rising within him, someone like you. Bewildered at the Dalmatian's accusations, Zuma was attempt to lash at him, but such a gesture would only solidify him as a broken bond. He couldn't afford to lose the trust of his companions. No, not me. You can trust me, he nodded. You need to. Well, there's a newsflash, came for the firefighter, puffing up his white fur and baring his teeth. I don't trust you. A loud bang suddenly tore through the air, making both dogs drew back in surprise. The sound resembled much of a punch of a metal, like someone threw itself onto the wall. It was then Zuma realized the horror just how loud they were talking. The conversation escalated far beyond safe parameters. Marshall paused, unable to move as he darted his vision around the corner in paranoia. What was that? Turning to look back at the fleshy orifice that they have climbed through to get into the room, Zuma scanned it over as if he was searching for something. It seemed like the only way inside until the lab looked up and noticed several displaced ceiling tiles. It could all be too easy for something to drop in from above. Hide! Zuma tried to hide on his own fears in his voice. Marshall didn't hear, still paralyzed. Hide! He snapped. Finally, the Dalmatian read his words. The spotted dog turned away to the tables and cabinets. Hide where? Crawling under the table was easy, but just so easy to glance under one another for prey. The cabinets were tight and claustrophobic. Not a phobia Marshall had, but still an uncomfortable position to be in. Are you sure it? An echo suddenly sounded throughout the room, resembling that of a long, layered exhale of breath. It was like a hiss, like a building itself was breathing around them. Soon after, the sound of metal clawing and scraping began to tear into the ears, fastly approaching. Marshall didn't need to be asked twice, exploding into a panic run, making a haste towards the storage cabinets. He clicked open the first dog and tried to climb in, only stopping upon realizing it was full of papers, assorted office equipment. Zuma broke into action, searching for a place to hide. Hiding within Marshall seemed like an easier option, but it was also the most dangerous as it would both render dogs dead should they be found. Even through the separation was a terrible idea in situations like this. Now was a unique time when it was necessary. The lab ran at another cabinet a few feet away, when suddenly another loud banging hit their ears and was closed. There was a world. Where was in Varrock's malice? With how close it sounded like, it seemed like they'd be in the room by now. Panicking, he abandoned the course of action and dove under one of the tables, laying low to the ground to avoid sticking out too much. Marshall was completely concealed, but Zuma had found less affordable place, as he found himself with little time to react. The only saving grace was that he was able to have a massive blanket of fabric draped over it, a sheet probably would use to cover up old computers. He knew the creature was rather tall, so it wouldn't see him right away, and the dusty blanket was helping obscuring him. Marshall closed the other door, his paws stumbling on the latch as dread fell over where reviving his focus. Clicking the door open, he saw the cabinet was completely empty. Not wasting even a second time, he climbed onto it and shut the door behind him, now contained like old food in Tupperware. Marshall had only 3 horizontal slits on the door to peek through. He held his breath, tried to slow his pounding heart, and patiently waited for the sign of the monster. Several minutes passed and neither dog heard nor saw anything. Zuma sat motionless like a dead double bull, checking every few seconds at his tail as it idly did not slid out into view. He feared for Marshall, believing right away the puppy was at risk of messing something up and giving himself away. He was surrounded by the unknown and refused to come out unless he was absolutely sure. Locked away in the cabinet, Marshall had the advantage of actually being able to see out. He scanned his eyes around the room, a difficult motion due to his field of view. Where is it? They heard it so close. Clearly, it was directly above their heads, just waiting to pounce. The creature would probably have just ambushed the room entirely if the dogs didn't continue arguing. Marshall waited for another few seconds, but if there were no sign of it, he gently put his paw on the door, once again taking a peek through the slits before he pushed it out. A man's golden paw of flesh suddenly slapped onto the front of the door, coming down above like a rotten chunk of meat and bone. Marshall suppressed a scream and drew back as far as he possibly could. Its claws slowly scratched the metal surface and Varrock's malice climbed down on top of the cabinets. The Dalmatian was unable to control his heavy breathing. Where in the world did it come from if he didn't see it come down from the ceiling? Dragging itself down, the creature's body of gore passed over the cabinet, and for once Marshall managed to get a clear view of its underbelly. To say Varrock's Malice had an underbelly was a stretch. A belly was a soft, ticklish surface, usually covered in fur, eager for belly rubs and to appease all the stress and anxiety of a dog. What Marshall was seeing now was nothing like that sort, a sight that made him gag in horror. The literal belly of the beast was crude canvas of gore, sprouting out webs of tendons, and secure its squirming body mass, despite its incredibly thin bone frame. Its chest did have a visible rib cage that jutted out its upper spine, resembling that of a cold, empty cage, where a heart should be. The stomach was visible off to the right, audibly gurgling away as it worked to digest some horrific, more foraging material. The stomach was hastily fastened into the spine with the intestines that were only organ Marshall could visibly recognize. He had no feasible idea of any of the other mess under the creature was, but it did catch his eye that Varrock's Malice had no visible heart. And with that limited view that he had of his ribcage, he swore he saw the faint outline of a small dog, maybe 2, maybe 4, trapped within the organic mass of ribs. An unspeakable horror was dangling from the monster's groin. Between its legs, a fleshy, gurgling sack hung like loose, dead flesh. It looked swollen, gradually stretching from the clusters of unborn eggs swimming inside it. A small, contracted opening was visible on the sack's end, a tiny nub following the direction of its tail. It was sealed tightly so not a drop of its precious cytoplasm would leak out of the body, yet patiently waiting for another egg to push out. To lay his eggs on such an organ made Marshall feel sick, the sight alone making his stomach twist. Varrock's Malice was very, very pregnant. Scraping off the cabinets, the predator slithered into the room, its fin tail flicking like an antenna. Footsteps were heavy and loud, terrifying Zuma. The closer they heard him draw nearer. The creature was far from unintelligent. Fully aware that its prey was nearby, it knew not to waste any energy overturning the tables and ripping down walls. Another method would work just as fine, if not better. Lowering its ripped skin, masked head, it opened its mouth and moved around its vocal cords. A gentle, soft voice left his maw. "Guys?" Zuma stopped cold, his eyes widening at the mix of shock and bewilderment. Marshall heard it just as clearly, and the Dalmatian came forward a little in the cabinet, itching to get a look. That was Rubble's voice. "Guys, I'm here," the bulldog echoed. "Zuma, where are you?" Varrock's Malice wasn't moving its mouth, nor did it have fully intact lips formed from words. It didn't need them. Its mutation had been left unchecked for so long, allowing it to reach a new stage of evolution. Rubble wasn't finished yet. It needed more body mass to put the bulldog back together, enough to make it convincing. Even then, if one had a few seconds standing before the creature, they'd be able to see Rubble's head poking out of its left shoulder. He wouldn't be the only one. Varrock's Malice maliciously prepared from its body 5 more dogs. "Marshall," Zuma breathed, despite knowing his friend couldn't hear him. "Please don't." The firefighter was almost hypnotized by the voice of his fallen friend, making him paw at the door of the cabinet. He missed Rubble so much, and Sky just as well. They hadn't physically seen Rubble get torn apart. To Marshall, the reason all he could be still alive. "Ruh," he stuttered, gently, scratching the door with his spotted claw. "Rubble." He wanted to so desperately come out. He yet knew he was going to die if he would. But if he had to, he couldn't. But he could. But Varrock's Malice was out there. And if it wasn't out there, what if it was really Rubble? An odd, lingering noise of static had entered the Dalmatian's head, sending his mind into a whirlwind of questions and reasonings. Marshall had shook his head, trying to pull himself back to reality. Turning his gaze to the door, he looked out to try and see his old friend, but his view had completely changed. He could see the musky, bloodied fangs of Varrock's Malice's maw breathing into the cabinet. A horrified cry was screeched into the air as Varrock's Malice snarled at its prey. Marshall squeezed himself back in the cabinets as far as he would go, now audibly shrieking in terror like a terrified puppy. Flexing its claws, the creature hissed as it contained food, and raked its paw as hard as it possibly could across the metal surface, producing a sound like scraping of a chalkboard of half a second. Zuma jumped out from under the table, filled with horror as he stared at his doomed friend. "Marshall!" The door held, but its metal built, resting on the bloodied razors of Rock's malice claws, irritated at the failed attack. The monster bristled in its tentacles from its back in agitation. It balled its beloved paw, pulling the arm back as wound up its strength. In a blinding second, it pushed onto the cabinet door, instantly deforming it and bending it inwards. Some sort of hinges snapped into view and flew off like broken wood chips, gently bouncing to the floor like dropped coins. The sound of the impact was like a gunshot, echoing throughout the air, making Zuma flinch. The lab was completely exposed, yet Varrock's malice ignored his presence, deliberately targeting the Dalmatian. The screams that the puppy made, the frantically scribbles of its spotted claws in the confined cabinet, it filled the monster with adrenaline. The creature let its claws drift through the exposed openings around the door, seductively trailing its nails along the edges. Marshall had lost the memo to remain calm and silent, and his life flashing before his eyes as he cowered before the monster tearing into his hiding spot. The Dalmatian cried helplessly as he was completely trapped with nowhere to run other than the jaws of death. In a brilliant display of power, the creature jerked its arm back and snapped the door from its place, tossing it away like a garbage. The firefighter tried to back up, only for a tentacle to coil around his neck in an instant. With brutal cruelty, Marshall was forcibly ripped out of his safety. A fleeable grunt escaped from his muzzle as his body collided with the hard tile floor. Dazed, with the puppy whimpered and meekly looked up, not only to see Varrock's mouth sucking back in like a tentacle through its arms. No! The Dalmatian gasped, trying to claw away. Leaning its head down, Varrock's mouth scanned its prey, seemingly anticipating for their next move. "Come on, Marshall!" Rubble's voice echoed from the mass of gore. "Why would you fight something so beautiful?" The predator slid a tentacle over its lips like a squirming appendage, then roared down at the puppy, baring its jaws of teeth. Acting fast, Zuma jumped out from one of the computer tables, frantically looking for anything to save his friend. There was a fire extinguisher standing idly by a few feet, just enough in the numbers that seemed to be sprinkled around the basement. Panicked Zuma jumped out from the table to table, accidentally slipping on one awkwardly he had in the third, grunted from the impact, gripping his dull claws into the table's surface. Varrock's malice picked up its head, eyeing the Labrador with the warning hiss. Seeing that the monster distracted, Marshall attempted to roll back onto his paws and run away. He didn't even get 2 inches away before Varrock's malice stepped into its leg onto its back, painfully pinning him to the floor. Why wasn't just killing him right away? Why not just end their suffering now? "Ah!" Zuma grabbed the fire extinguisher in his arms, and with all the strength he had, "Eat this!" Calling forward a burst of energy, he flung the pressurized explosive directly at the monster. The red projectile smacked the Varrock's malice in the face, bouncing off its cheek and making the creature hiss in annoyance. It plummeted to the floor with a loud crash, eventually rolling to a stop. The impact caused a dent in its shell, and a hissing sound could be heard. Snarling in anger, the predator released Marshall, only to open its palm and shoot out a thriving tentacle. The appendage coiled around the dog's torso and yanked helplessly into the air. "Ah! Ah!" The spotted puppy flailed as he was being picked up. "Help!" Pulling the tentacle back in, Varrock's malice caught Marshall in its paw, roared fiercely into the air, and flung the puppy into Zuma. "Ah!" Zuma had to dive off the table to avoid the friendly fire, landing lightly on his neck. The landing didn't kill him, but came dangerously close. Instead of sending the shock through the lab's body, Marshall flew past him, crashing into the back wall, ricocheting off, and a bloodstain was left where Marshall hit the surface. The puppy landed limply on the floor, a faint twitch emitted from his paw. Before him, the Dalmatian, completely and entirely, stopped moving, blood leaking around him. The fire extinguisher continued hissing. The compounded chemicals within it struck the force with haste that they struggled to stabilize. but the damage to their protective shell was more than it can handle. The leaking gas can emit a smell. Zuma turned its head, and where its partner had fallen, its breathing erratic and shaky. "Marshall!" He screamed backwards in the office, shaking his head in denial. "No!" He tried to scream something else, but the monster's roar drowned it out, gripping its claws onto the floor. Varrock's malice stalked Zuma, gritting his teeth. There was no way out this time. A revelation that tauntingly jeered the Labrador as he frantically looked for a direction to flee. Death had stared at him in the eyes. His heart skipped beats as he pressed up against the wall in terror. The Coast Guard off the Paw Patrol left at the mercy of the perfect killer. Fed up with the games, Varrock's malice brandished its claws and roared in fury, lunging for the puppy. Like a primed landmine, the fire extinguisher detonated spectacularly, pressuring gas blast out of the fractured container, immediately erupting into burning flames. The explosion condensed into one small room, smashed through the tables, and hurled one of those loose objects into the walls. Varrock's malice was thrown off balance, stumbling its feet while it tried to shake off its disoriented feeling from its head. Seizing its escape, the creature scampered away, only to stop directly in front of the pile of burning papers. Fearing its body to avoid it, Varrock's malice lost balance and crashed into a set of storage cabinets. The entire display crumbled in on top of it, burying the monster in splintered wood, twisted metal, and various clumsy objects. The fleshy, tight cavern had led the hive behind them, was entirely pulsed with life, reacting to the detected threat. Its walls closed in, sealing itself tightly to protect the nest. The sudden action knocked Zuma out briefly as the puppy blurred its vision, slowly returning like that of a burning room. Smoke and had splintered wood showered him in all directions. "Marshall!" he called, trying to shield his eyes from the stinging smoke. With no other option, Zuma ran to Marshall, blindly traversing the chaos. A piercing static in his head was shrieking over and over, following him as he grabbed Marshall's body by the scuff. With what little strength he could muster, Zuma dragged Marshall as best he could through the room, his fur slowly burning over from the searing heat alone. The old computer, even now charred and damaged beyond repair from the blast, still sat in front, pinning the door closed. The whole room was in molten shambles, with nothing but heat and splinters every 2 feet. The fire was slowly dying as the blast had occurred in somewhat of an isolated corner of the room, and it was running out of things to spread to. 4 massive tentacles exploded out of the debris that covered the floor in a ranged screech that teared through the suit and ash. They writhed and twisted, colliding around the fallen tables and furniture that pinned their host, contracting with all their might. The powerful appendages crushed inwards, forcing the old wood until the objects were snapped entirely in half. It was going to dig itself out. Zuma was completely trapped with not just a single safe place to go. The gory tunnel behind him had sealed itself. The confounded door in front of him was still barred to access, and Varrock's malice was already creating dust clouds as it tore itself free. Holding Marshall in its arms, Zuma struggled to seize their spheres, his life flashing before his eyes while he backed up against a wall. "Not like this," he pleaded. "Not like this." The monster's roar filled the room, making the lab hold his dear friend even tighter, fearfully waiting for his demise. "Did you hear that?" Chase narrowed his eyes, pricking his ears. Liberty and Rocky stopped walking, turning to their senses for any noise around them. Their surroundings were quiet for a few seconds, until the sound of a smashed table echoed them. "What is that?" Rocky took a small step forward, flattening his ears. Is that the creature?" Chase and Liberty met up with Rocky soon after their conversation, rejoining the concerned mix and continuing their hike through the basement. As they each walked, the dogs carried their individual thoughts throughout the matter. Chase was filled with an odd combination of fear and determination. Striving to fix his mistakes while still boiling in shame, Rocky's thoughts were on this shepherd friend, quietly worried about his mental stability. Plotting in secret, Liberty had scanned dozens of ways in her head to find the samples she needed, She wasn't going back to the Archline Foundation empty pod. She needed at least something. Pointing at the gray paw, Rocky had eyed a jointing path up in his head, briefly obscured by the bloodied intestine hanging from the ceiling. It sounded like an explosion. From there, he pointed his paw at the new jointing tunnel. Let's go! Wait, are we going to the fret? Chase whipped his head at him, staring at the mix. Are you insane? You want to go towards that thing that's been killing all of us? Ignoring him, Rocky sped up towards the path. We left Zuma and Marshall. They could be in trouble. Bad idea, Rocky. Why can't we just keep going straight? He flicked his ears around towards the continuing path. There's no sense making twists and turns. I'm not leaving my friends, Chase. Well, Chase stuttered, trying to formulate a response that didn't make him sound terrible. I think maybe we... He hesitated again, completely lost in his words. Liberty pushed past him. Here, I'll go forward. You go with Rocky. She instantly charged off, leaving no opportunity for Chase to respond. Oh, fantastic. I get to see the death monster with my idiot friend, the shepherd grumbled, walking over to follow Rocky. Picking up his pace, he caught up with the mix as he was slowly pushing under the hanging tendrils. There was a fierce spark of tendency within the mixed breed, and Chase felt a pang of jealousy. It wasn't far that Rocky was stronger-willed than him. Oh God, good, you're with me on this. Rocky flashed an ear-ending smile at his partner. No, I'm fucking not. They approached the door, which was sealed shut. It wasn't made out of wood or had visible hinges or knobs. It was an electric door that lifted up and down, made of sturdy metal that wasn't easily broken. Whatever's behind there must be important. Rocky narrowed his eyes. How do we open this? Chase approached the door and sniffed around its outline, pawing at the fleshly sludge, trailing his arm along. He located the lever that was buried under the gore. Here, he said, with a mild amusement, gripping the handle in his teeth and yanking down. The door opened by itself, almost like magic, providing access to a dark room. Rocky walked inside before Chase had finished wiping his mouth off blood and looking around. The mix noticed what looked like an odd box with buttons inside of it. The hell? He turned his head to see a large mass of pipes running along the left wall like a master plumbing system. Chase had followed in after him. What is this, some kind of utility room? Walking in deeper, Rocky rounded the corner. No, I think it's some kind of... He stopped in his tracks, coming up in the new doorway. Sheesh, why is it so hot over here? He panted slightly. A feeling of immense climbed up in temperature, radiating from the new door. He almost turned away, and then it pinged in his head. Wait, is this the boiler room? It is. Rocky walked up behind him. Certainly feels like one. I need this door open. The shepherd jumped into action, motivated at the thought of his problems ending. He nearly threw himself off the lever off the wall, assuming that the mechanism wasn't the same as the last one. Rocky watched him as a stunned expression. As Chase pulled the lever door, to click of gears were heard. The door opened, instantly releasing a massive blast of shearing heat, as if it were waiting for them on the other side. The flames overtook Rocky by surprise, forcing him to jump back and with an exclaiming cry. The heat caught Chase at his side, throwing him to the floor and roasting over him. They both shielded themselves for dear life as they felt the pressured room vented out with a jamming clang. The door only peered open for a foot away before getting stuck. Just 4 feet in the room, Zuma had looked over in surprise. The computer table sharply knocked over the sides as the door opened, falling over into the flames. What? The lab blinked, threw out the smoke, realizing he was completely wrong out why the door was opening. Chase? Ah! The shepherd scrambled to his paws, retreating from the flames. What the hell happened here? A monstrous canine arm wedged free from the debris, Varrock's malice loudly tearing itself out from under its trap. Each of its limbs spared out, and its head pushing up from the crumbled metal. Run! Zuma shouted, with what little voice he had left, hurriedly taking Marshall through the hallway. Go, go! We'll trap it in here! Rocky screamed, as he spotted the lever that Chase had used. They had already spotted Marshall's broken state, a sight that shot Chase to the moment he saw. No, it couldn't be. The shepherd panicked. Had Zuma done something? Zuma have done something. Rage flared within his veins as he watched the lab pull the puppy through. The chase then and turned in the hostile grimace. Approaching the small brown dog, he opened his mouth to spit an accusation. Wood and metal blasted out outwards, spraying across the charred room as Varrock's mouth erupted free, tearing from its burdens into pieces. The monster swiftly backhanded any annoying little object still in his vision as he climbed out. Its legs were still pinned, crushing its bones like a fiery agony that only intensified its rage. Unhinging from its jaw, a sickening cracking noise emitted while its gums flared to life. A large tentacle rivaling with its tail in size, regenerated out of the spilling red and blood bodily fluid. It moved into the air like a massive snake, hissing jaws of its own. Varrock's malice screeched loudly, flicking its head up to whip the weapon forward. Chase turned back at the noise, flattening his ears in terror as he sounded coming. "Rocky, look out!" The mix had little time to react. As he heard Chase's words, he flashed the shepherd a single look of surprise, only to feel something wet and tough coil around his legs. Rocky was yanked off balance and hit the floor, screaming in panic as the Varrock's mouth tightened his hold on him. Desperately reaching for the door lever that was just 3 inches from his paw, he tried with all of his puppy might to fight against the hold, but slowly he began to get pulled in. "Chase the door!" he yelled, grabbing anything he could to fight it. A sharp jerk traveled down his tentacle, whipping Rocky's body around in such ways that threatened to dislocate his leg. The shepherd tried to stand, but a disoriented wave blurred over his vision. The close proximity of the creature seemed to have an odd effect on him. "Chase!" Rocky planted his claws on the floor, desperately trying to save himself. "Huh?" The police officer blinked, stumbling to his paws. "Huh? The door!" Varrock's malice roared, its jaw unhinging even more. The base of the large tentacle pushed out of its mouth, revealing itself to the room. It was made up entirely of a body, that very familiar bulldog. Its mangled body integrated into the weapon, rubble violently jerked and convulsed. His skull split, cracked open for a tentacle to shoot out of it. His tall, stubby little legs, of what remained of them, clawed and flailed with every motion Varrock's malice made. "Chase, get the— Ah!" Rocky cried out. Zuma flew by Chase, bumping past him as he jumped onto the lever. A loud, solid motion. The lab gripped on the lever and yanked it down, activating the mechanism. The door almost shut instantaneously, locking the creature inside and merely crushing Rocky from above. The massive tentacle holding the mix was severed, prompting an echo howl of rage from the other side. The horror was over, at least for now. Rocky scrambled backwards, breathing heavily as he was filled with terror. "Zuma?" "I'm here." The lab went to his side, helping him untangle his legs. It was finally now that Chase's static-filled mind was cleared again and came back to reality. Blinking in confusion, he looked around and spotted Rocky getting up, nuzzling Zuma in gratitude. "Oh," he stuttered, in a low, quiet surprise. A gut-wrenching feeling of shame hit him. Before he could say anything, Rocky and Zuma raced off, seeking to check Marshall's condition, despite leaving Chase completely alone. "Hey, wait!" he muttered, running after them. On the other hand, Varrock's malice stumbled back, shock hitting from its body as its tendrils were being cut. It was a bit off concern in the long run, as it had mutated long enough just to regenerate at a faster frequency. More was coming soon anyway. It was of little importance. Finally pulling itself free, the creature hissed as it approached the door, scanning for a halfway to only be met by none. It swallowed rubble and cut off the end of the tentacle, growing in its proposition. It was filled with hatred, and a piece of it wanted to tear into the wall and the tunnel back to them. Only then its nose caught a smell, a scent that made him stop in its tracks, turning his head and smell of a dachshund, a dog who foolishly split up from the group. Snarling in hunger, the creature shook itself off and raced down the hallway.
What's up, my pretties? It's the Lion Queen here.
I want to appreciate you all for tuning into this video, and I do appreciate you guys supporting my video by giving this video likes and stuff. If you really enjoyed this video, be sure to leave a like, comment and subscribe if you're new, ring the bell for notifications to when I upload so that way you guys will get updated for whenever I upload. If you want to follow me on Twitter or DeviantArt, feel free to leave a follow on those if you are interested in following me on those socials. If you want to support my backup channel, known as Miss Dark Shigo, feel free to subscribe to it, as a link to that will also be in the About page section. And with that being said, and that being the case, thank you so much for watching, my pretties, and as always, stay pretty.